Hello friends and welcome to BISPTrainings.com. My name is Amit and today I'm going to give you a very brief overview about workforce planning and how to initialize workforce planning. We are going to prepare a series of videos in which I'm going to teach you how to set up workforce planning, customize workforce planning, integrate your workforce planning with your existing planning application, and we'll talk about various building blocks and advanced options in workforce planning. In today's session, I'm going to give you a very high level overview about what workforce planning is all about, what are the different components of workforce planning, and how to initialize the workforce planning in EPM environment. So, as you know, workforce planning is a pre-built, pre-packaged application with some pre-built functionality. It is designed to simplify your workforce planning activities, workforce planning and budgeting activities, and forecast your related expenses like compensation planning, salary, healthcare expenses. You can actually link your workforce planning application with your existing application and see how your workforce expenses impact your overall budgeting process. For example, you like to see how your total employee expenses, direct and indirect expenses impact your overall financial expenses, okay, and operational expenses. How workforce planning different strategies are going to impact your entire organization strategy. So workforce planning all about right people, right skill, putting them to right place at right time. Okay, with minimize the cost. I'm trying to show you with different charts and different images what exactly workforce planning, what exactly your stakeholders, business managers, HR manager like to know, what information they like to know from the workforce planning. So naturally they would like to know what is the current and future expenses, predictive expenses across all department or individual department. So if you look at over here how my HR expenses are growing year over year across different departments. Business also like to see the summary information about it. What is the historical expenses, and based on this, how would you plan and forecast our future expenses so that we make sure our HR strategy is in line with entire organization strategy. So this is why I have 550 and 16 and my salary expenses reduced by minus 2.7%, and my benefits are grown by 12.4%. Okay, this is my current statistics. In addition, this business user would also like to know um, your headcount and the salary expenses, the relationship between these two variables. If you look at this, we are trying to evaluate the employee headcount year over year and in addition to the employee expenses. And we find some interesting trend in 2008 and 9. My headcount grown up, but my salary expenses are not grown to the same ratio. So based on the data I have available from 1998 to 2009, I could predict for next few years of data. So my budgeting process will be close to, it won't be 100% accurate, but close to real numbers. This is another summary dashboard which your most often your HR manager, your CFO, the decision maker like to know about your organization, like what is FT rate, employee expenses per head count, employee direct and indirect expenses. So across different department or different line of business, or maybe more granular or more summary information business like to see about the employees, and this is where the Hyperion planning comes into picture. uh, Workforce planning uh, is implemented in 3 steps regardless whatever application you use, and Hyperion planning designed to inline with this workforce planning strategy model. So if you look at it, it's done in 3 steps: analyze, align, and act. Analyze is more about like what if scenario. What if some event happen? What could have a consecutive consequences to my other elements or events? Like understand where you are, starting point for planning and where you can be, and build your scenario to align the people, plan to business strategies, and future scenario based on your historical trend. So the previous slide which I shown you talked about your historical trend. By keeping the historical trend in mind, we can even plan for the future scenarios. So what if scenario, Hyperion planning as a product has plenty of drivers and which allow you to do your what if analysis. What if your salary tax are or payroll tax are revised by 10%? How it is going to impact in your overall financial, strength. So various what if analysis can be driven by different drivers. This is what we do under analysis. Align workforce building. You collaborate across the organization to build the plan. Okay, so they have different elements, different departments. They work together to drive your workforce planning needs. So maybe you're expecting some project in next 2 months, and in order to in order to execute the product, how what is the manpower, human resource, capital, skill resources you need, or you can plan and align with your organization strategy. Share and iterative on headcount demand to increase the accuracy and buy-in. And as I said, giving you example, in order to meet your future project or business demand, what headcount they need, what skill set they need, what are the expenses associated with them, direct and indirect expenses, all you like to align and budget and forecast. And finally, based on this, how your business users, your stakeholder can take decision. So the more visibility they have about their focus about the existing expenses and business plan, according they can do more accurate budgeting and forecasting. So overall we are trying to provide them increased visibility about your workforce expense data. We can also compare how our actuals are close to our target or budget, how my budgeting process has been, how accurate my budgeting process has been for last 3 or 4 years and so on. And you build a various driver based on which you can quickly adapt the new changes. So Hyperion planning is also designed to Hyperion planning, workforce planning, pre-built application is designed to inline with these three strategies. If you talk about a specific to Hyperion planning, workforce planning, these are the important bullet points about it. It can calculate your current and predictive expenses, future budgeting expenses related to workforce like salary, compensation, benefit, taxes, and we can also efficiently manage employee transfer functionality. Transfer functionality is an important part of your workforce planning in order to make sure you are optimally utilize your resources in all the context. So specifically when business is so dynamic, for dynamic organization, they would like to make use of their resources to the max, and therefore employee transfer functionality is very common and required to have various business logic associated with this. Hyperion planning designed efficiently to manage these functionality. Optimize planning process, meet the need of global enterprise. We can customize planning process. The planning as a Hyperion planning, workforce planning as a pre-built package or framework. I can modify this, customize in order to make sure that uh, it meets the current demand and the business needs. We have plenty of variables, stakeholder through which we can modify the planning process. For example, we have a dimension member called employees, where we have a dimension member called new employees. It has a placeholders of 100 employees. I can add employees as I need them. It gives you the option to have a drill through which you can have a summary and detailed information. Maybe I can see the employee HR expenses for entire organization, further drill down to line of business, sub line of business, to the cost center, and how my expenses are impacting the other department or other part of the business. It offers the standard planning and forecasting features which your Hyperion planning offer. And the most exciting feature about Hyperion workforce planning, you can integrate Hyperion workforce planning with your existing system. Uh, Generally, the feed or data comes from Hyperion workforce planning from PeopleSoft or similar HR application, and you can see how this HR expenses are going to impact my other part of my expenses. You know, so if my HR expenses are revised, how it is going to impact my overall budget of the organization. There are two kind of planning process when business plan to implement workforce planning. They have a 2 point in their mind. What is my strategic and operational planning? Operational workforce planning focuses for a short-term goal from 6 to 18 months of plan process. We focus on skills, capabilities, and expenses for the employees related to the employee for next short-term goal for 6 to 18 months. So operational planning designed to meet their short-term goals. Based on short-term goals, we design our strategic planning. So where do you want you to take your organization next 5 years? What would be your future role? The different questions related to the organization workforce are being handled at a strategic workforce planning. So objective workforce planning is from 3 to 5 years and anticipate skills, human manpower roles, um, all comes under the human resource boundaries. And we can also predict for the future, uh, expenses and resources, skills. If you talk about a specific Hyperion planning, workforce planning ship along with some pre-built dimension. Okay. So the first dimension, account dimension, when you log into your workforce planning for the first time, uh, under administration section, you can see I already initialized one sample workforce planning application. So you see there's an account dimension which has got system defined member, which in turn has got some drivers, uh, different kind of driver which actually help you to calculate your salaries, compensation, benefit, taxes, isn't it? So there are certain assumptions: salary assumption, tax assumption, healthcare assumption, merit, bonus rates, bonus by grade. So when you customize your application, you have a liberty to, based on your input, the total calculation take place. So account is actually an alternate hierarchy of account dimension. This account dimension will in turn inline with my actual account dimension when you integrate with your Hyperion workforce planning with your actual planning application. So it's basically a subset of a common chart of account which is specific to employee related expenses. We have a different kind of driver which help to perform calculation. Okay, and we have a member which store the intermediate result, and we also have various properties and characteristics related to the employee. All this information is available under account dimension. And account dimension is seeded dimension. As part of initialization, this dimension comes. Second dimension is called job dimension. As you see, the job dimension is hierarchical view of your structure, different roles you have in your organization. And then we have an employee dimension. This is also one of the seeded dimension. The employee dimension contains employees of the organization, calculate salary, benefit of compensation, and related all properties of the employees are stored under employee dimension. Workforce planning give you option for existing employee and new hires. If you look at your employee dimension and job dimension, you find over there. Example, employee dimension has got two elements: full-time and part-time, and total employee. Existing employee, you can add new employees from your interface. By adding dimension member, you have placeholder for existing employees, isn't it? And we have other element unspecified employee. We do have a provision to have a contractual employees and other category employee as well. In addition, this workforce planning ship along with some predefined dimension members, data form, business rule, task list, menu, and all. So as part of your initialization, all these artifacts come to your system automatically. So when you log into your workforce planning application, you might see them. For example, I look at a task list. In the task list, I could see there are task list designed based on different job roles. So there are two job roles. We have workforce administrator and planner, and the intern planner is classified as a power user, or you call workforce analyst. We do have actions, menus, task list, smart list, data form. These are different artifacts of application comes as part of the initialization. As we proceed further, we'll talk about all these artifacts step by step. Next, I'm going to take you how to initialize workforce planning application. In first example, we are going to initialize workforce planning application as an individual application using EPMA. In subsequent example, I show you various other options available, like initialize your workforce application through classic application interface, or adding workflow application as one plant type in your existing application. Let's start with creating new workforce planning application. Okay. So the first step, as we always do, we create the schema where my planning artifacts and metadata are going to store. So I create a new schema, and for the sake of testing, I'm going to give an admin privilege to my schema. Actual list of schema and the related privileges are available in your student guide. You can look at this. Primary, you need a create table, create view, create indexes, update, these privileges you need. I create new schema, uh, create new user, workforce application 1. Then I grant DBA, connect and create session privileges to workforce application. I would use this schema to initialize my workforce application. Okay? Because we are creating workforce application through EPMA, the step 1 is to create application from application library. You create new application, file new application, name your application whatever you like to give, like all workforce application 2. The type of application is planning application. Select. The moment you select planning, the entire interface changes. Underline option appear according to planning. I wanted to create all local dimension for now, and subsequently I would add the member to the local dimension. Okay, so I define description also. This is workforce planning application, and in this example I'm going to keep only one plant type, workforce, and subsequent example we create integration of workforce planning application with existing application and create multiple plant type. So my objective is just to walk you through with existing artifacts, what artifact comes along with your workforce planning when you initialize it. um, you define the base time period is 12 months, starting month is January. I'm assuming it's a calendar year. I can have a fiscal year as well. And weekly distribution I select 445. You can have your own local time period dimension and local year dimension as well. In this example I'm going to keep a local dimension called year, and I start with 2014, next for 10 years. So for last 2014 and 15 I would have historical data, and 16 third quarter onwards I would have a budget data. You go to next. When you go to next, it asks you to see the dimension. Okay, so as Hyperion planning application, there are 7 predefined dimension like entity. If you look at the dimension type, dimension structure, dimension name, sorry, and so in entity, version, scenario, account, these are all new dimension. However, you can change this to existing dimension which you already import into your metadata into dimension library. So in my dimension library, I've got a couple of entity dimension as well. I have entity dimension. I already have work, employee dimension, entity, job, year, period. I can map my existing application, so new application, to um, new dimension, or I can use and create new dimension. I have option to select any one of them. In this example, I'm going to create new entity dimension, version, scenario, and account. So when you create new, all the seeded dimension member will inherit automatically. You tag them as a local dimension, and the period dimension I'm going to inherit from my workforce period dimension, right? The one which I already uploaded over here, workforce period dimension. I imported this dimension. I would go with alias new. Employee dimension, I would continue with existing employee dimension. As we need more member, we can add up. One change I'm going to do over here, you see you have option to create multiple custom dimension and attribute dimension, UD and all. In this example, I'm going to create one attribute dimension for employee demographic. In a subsequent session, I'm going to show you how to use employee demographic dimension. It's an attribute dimension, therefore we need to associate with some base dimension. So employee demographic is a property for employee dimension. Okay, and that's it. Seems everything good. we start with basic and then we go for advanced options. So it is going to create an application, and then I may have some couple of errors or warning message. I'll go through each error and going to address them one by one. It takes few seconds to initialize to create application. I can log into my schema meanwhile and check. So it's a workforce application 1. I got connected and we'll see do we have any table now. Create table name from user score underscore tables. It's a table underscore name. Right now there no table exists, right? So the dimension of a workforce has been seeded, and therefore uh, all the validation errors or warning message would be appear over here. When I click on validate, I would find the error message warning. If you look at over here right now, I have a warning message pertaining to um, dimension performance order. I'm going to address this issue. So I just need to change the dimension order. Right click and add performance setting and change the order. I'm going to keep my account dimension followed by entity, then followed by scenario, version, year and period. Employee dimension keep it at the bottom. Okay. Validate once again. Validation pass, and now your application ready to deploy. Okay. If you want to make further changes to your application, you can do this before you actually deploy your application. Like you can change date format in case you want to make multi-currency true, start here and all. Right now we are going to make all the default option true, active, and create only workforce application. Click finish. Likewise, any EPM application, this application also will submit. The creation of this application would be submit as a job. I have configured my Hyperion single instance web server and single application server. I don't have option. I would select over here planning application under my workforce shared service project. Data source does not exist. I'm going to create new data source. Click on this new option and create new data source. My underlying data source is Oracle. I define data source detail. I install Oracle in my local system. So I use localhost. You would give a IP address of your server. So I'm going to use a schema called workforce application 1 and the password. Validate, test connection pass, and then you can proceed. Connect to Oracle Space database. Space is also installed in local machine. If you install in distributed installation, distributed environment, give a IP address of the server. Colon your port number. Test connection. My Space is configured common port, standard port 1423. So I'm going to create outline. That's it. I don't need any other function, and click on deploy. Deployment in EPM will submit a job with job ID 145, and I would see the progress of my job is being how the job is being executed. It is done so far 66%. Okay. And behind the screen it would have created a set of tables. When I log in and see the tables are being created, I need to wait for a little more time and I could see the list of tables are created behind the screen in your relation database. Well, you can log into your space and refresh your application. You may see your workforce application what I've created. Maybe it takes few more seconds and then you can find your workforce application over here. So let's wait for few seconds and let this step be completed. Once it is done, I have an application listed out over here, and as I see the application listed out over here, and database will have been created in few minutes. Right, I could see the set of underlying table has already been created under this. I continue to refresh this. and I see the workforce planning application has been deployed successfully. Once it is done, you can log into open your application, planning application, refresh it. So newly created workforce planning application would be visible in your application list. Workforce planning application number 2. Because this is a pre-built, pre-packaged application, you find pre-built dimension structure like your account dimension, which has got some drivers, system message, system members, different drivers under your workforce, under assumptions, salary drivers, tax drivers, bonus drivers, bonus rates. These are different drivers. So when you calculate your salary, it will be based on the driver, the value associated with the driver, right? Tax rate assumptions, different kind of tax rates. This is a kind of this is an account dimension which may go along with the standard account dimension. And then you have employees. So if you see, employee has got total employee, full-time, existing employee, new employee. Existing employee is empty. New employee has got some placeholders. Hiring employee 1 to 100. And then we have no employees, unspecified employee, to give a room for employee like contractor and all. We have a job dimension. The job dimension work along with employee dimension to define types of job structure. Right now it is empty. In next example step, we are going to load import job dimension from our HRMS application. And then we have a period, year, and scenario. Important point is when you look at the task list is designed to keep 3 job roles in mind. Initially, as a workforce planning administrator, you set up certain assumptions. For that, there are job role associate workforce administrator or administration, and planning and workforce analyst. The task list, 3 task lists are mapped to 3 defined job roles. And then you have predefined data form. They won't open right now because I need to set up the variable value. So if you try to open maintenance, new hire request, in data form you try to open, it won't open now. It might ask you to set the value for the variable under the preferences. I go to file, new preferences, and preference I need to specify it under user variable. Right. So we continue setting up this application. The next activity we are going to do under this, we'll do what are set of activities workforce planning administrator has to perform. Okay. We continue talking about this in next video as well. For now, I'm going to stop over here. In next example, I'm going to show you how do you configure workforce planning application in your existing planning application. So today I'm going to stop here, and if you have any question, you can write to us, or you can visit our site www.bispsolutions.com. Thanks for joining today's session, and have a good day ahead.